Europe builds and builds well.
We have the founders and the stories to prove it.
I'm Matilda Nathan, founder of Born.
And I'm Nico Evstathiou, journalist and author.
And together we will be co-hosting some of Europe's greatest founders in Europe Builds.
Scaling challenges, fundraising strategies, diverse cultures, and the art of storytelling. Join us as we explore some tough topics with candor and detail. Welcome to another episode where we will be discussing with one of Europe's greatest founders and delving a little bit more deeply on what it takes to build a brand. Now, we have with us today an extra special guest, Jenny Tsai, the founder and CEO of WeArisma, a leading global influence analytics platform that works with some of the biggest companies. We're talking names like Ralph Lauren, Shiseido, and Campari, helping them measure and optimize their influencer marketing strategy and return of investment. Now, Jenny has an impressive international media career, which makes this an extra special episode for me, spanning TV, print, and digital media, as well as an educational background in finance and engineering. Suffice it to say, Jenny, you bring a very unique skill set, which is at the intersection of tech, data, and a lot of different creative industries. Before founding WeArisma in 2015, Jenny's role at magazine publisher Hearst saw her lead international digital strategy as the company's then youngest digital media director. And she grew audiences for some iconic brands, including Elle and Cosmopolitan, across more than 50 countries outside of the US. Thank you so much, Jenny, for being here with us today.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It's great to be here.
I did a little bit of the introduction, I guess, but we always like giving founders some room to do it themselves. So assume that you were stuck with me in an elevator and you wanted to sort of give me an elevator pitch of both what you do, but most importantly, what WeArisma has been doing over the past couple of years. So what would that elevator pitch sort of sound like?
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Jenny Tsai. I'm the founder and CEO of WeArisma. And again, we are a leading global influence analytics platform. So a bit of background, just have a think back. When was the last time when you learned about the latest brands or product? And how did you find out about them? We know that 75% of consumers actually start their purchasing journeys from recommendations of influential sources, not from the brand's website or their social accounts. Problem is that 4 out of 5 marketeers actually do not know how to measure or optimize this very channel. And I don't blame them, because we've identified over the last 7 years 126 million influential sources worldwide that they could be working with. So how do you begin? And also what we've learned is that simply choosing the right influencer is also not enough. The best campaigns that we see create these ripples and resonance that require the campaigns to have standout creatives, that have the right alignment with brands and the alignment with the right moments, so that you can have the right talent, right product, right messaging at the right time. So we are this influence analytics platform that provides the end-to-end analytics that turns this very complex landscape of influencer marketing into a strategic advantages for our clients.
126 million. Okay, I never thought that there are that many out there. You're probably familiar with some of the big names, but I guess there's micro influencing there included as well. I was actually very curious when kind of reading about you and about WeArisma. What was the thing that actually led you to start this journey? And from what I'm understanding, you're also a solo founder, right?
Yes.
That's a difficult kind of path to walk, and I don't know that many solo founders. So I was very curious about that.
I guess when I was working at Hearst as a digital media director, I remember distinctively we're covering World Cup, right? And then every country was covering it quite differently. But what was really interesting was that Instagram was just starting to basically take over the world. And what we were looking at with a lot of the audience is that when they arrive on our site, quite often they've already checked out the Instagram accounts of the athletes and the influencers who actually, immediately were posting various things before any kind of news or any kind of things has break. And then what it dawned on me was just like, wow, this is like a completely new way of, information dissemination, of how people learn about media and then marketing in general. So that I think that really compelled me to create my own company, to really look at how this space, which is completely transforming before my eyes, can be better leveraged by marketeers all around the world. So that was kind of the aha moment. And as far as the solo founder part, even though I am a solo founder, I didn't feel alone, if that may. So I started actually with Alex, actually from the team, who actually is still one of the members in the team as a tech lead. Since then, we basically built a tremendous team to kind of realize what we believe as the common shared vision of helping marketers everywhere to navigate this new space. So I feel very fortunate that even though I'm a solo founder, I wouldn't have been possible. It wouldn't have been possible without a team around me. So.
Interesting time. I kind of remember the time when a lot of the new social media brand trends were sort of blowing up, but it was sort of uncharted territories for many industries, right? So I'm wondering what the beginning of this relationship that you started building with these big brands looked like. Were they convinced that this is a big opportunity? Was there a lot of hype around it? And how did you manage to convince them that sort of this data-driven approach that you offered was the way to go?
I think as any startup, what you really need to start with is a number of anchor clients, I think, to begin with, right? So when we first started, of course, we learned a lot about the sector by, doing the actual campaigns ourselves. We started off, trying a few kind of more of an agency approach and make sure that we really understand what matters to clients and so on and so forth. And then in the background, we were very heavily building the tech because my vision has always been, building a SaaS platform that brands anywhere can just access. Brands and agencies, in fact, anywhere can just access this information themselves to help with their decision making. So after a few go at the campaigns, we actually, got to a good version of the system, and we also have been discovering influencers worldwide with a very unique approach of identifying influencers actually locally across all the different countries, different places, getting people who are based in those countries to actually give recommendations as we give them like assignments to say, hey, like working with different team members, say, hey, we're looking for, I don't know, chefs in your country. We're looking for artists, people who are truly influential in that space. And then we then build ability to kind of think about how we can find similar talent in those countries. And so, in short, once we kind of started to have a good, understanding of this landscape, when we present to the big brands, first of all, landing the opportunity quite often, sometimes it's through some introductions and various parts, but the important part is the meeting itself has to be, super well prepared and prepped. So we actually went in, actually showing this particular brand, basically all the influential sources that are relevant to them, that has either spoken about them, very big in their world, and how well they have done, and they just frankly have not seen this level of insight before we arrived. And I think it was, it was one of the luxury brands, and they literally was like, fine, done. Like, I've never seen it. We'll be looking for. Yeah, so, and then I think what is really, really important is it's a long game, right? So, of course, we have to make sure we deliver against the value that we presented. We need to make sure that the customer service is top notch. So we learned a lot from an anchor case. And then, of course, then we build up a reputation and good word of mouth from there. So, of course, you need to, have a starting point somewhere, but it's all about kind of putting our best effort and making sure that we really make sure that they have the best experience from there.
I was actually very curious. So you said that you're sourcing kind of many influencers locally. How many influencers do you have in your in your base?
So we don't source in terms of connect with the influencers.
You don't do the connection,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me
so
more
what we enable is more around ability to allow brands to discover. So imagine like if you go on, I don't know, if you go on Instagram search, you can try to find, list of, accounts that are about a certain part. But then, if you're trying to run a campaign that has Instagram, TikTok, and so on, you wanted to understand, anyone who kind of have talked about, I don't know, your brands before. Say if you're like Coca-Cola, you want to talk about anyone who's talked about Coca-Cola, who are influential, who are in different countries, who have, also certain propensity for wanting to post about sports content. Like, where do you go? So we're that Google equivalent. We're that search engine that allow people to discover influencers of all different types, all different interests, all different. Think of influencers as publishers, right? So you can basically figure out kind of how you can actually find your brand ambassadors that are most representative to what your brand is trying to bring to the world. That's sort of how we enable it. And then the question then becomes, do you have the right group of brand ambassadors? Can you optimize that further? Should you have, you can look at people who are, bigger, medium, smaller, different types of followings, or is it more about the kind of, are they just all about fashion? Should they be about DJ? Should they be musicians? Should they be mostly based in, I don't know, the city or, different parts, where the audience based. So there's a range of criteria that you need to do in order to make sure the campaign is actually successful.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, you're giving me as a brand kind of this intelligence. And then in terms of actions, the brand is kind of deep diving into what can I do with this insight, or you already kind of have recommendations for the brands around what actions can they take?
Yeah, so there's absolutely depends on as a brand what you want us to do, right? So we have, on the basic kind of level, you can just say, I just want to have access to understand how I identify influencers at scale, how I can track and measure the campaigns, once I've select them across all the different platforms so I can report on it. Or I actually wanted to understand, okay, what's trending amongst the influential space? Like, what are people talking about, right? What is something that I can maybe jump on the bandwagon and be sort of socially relevant? Like from our data set, we can understand like I don't know, before the Barbie movie comes out, like 9 months before, already people are talking about Pink, talking about Barbie, talking about all those things. And maybe you can incorporate that into your campaigns, right? So there's a lot of ways that creatively you can engage. And then, of course, there's a lot of things you can understand is how before and after we're doing the campaign, how's your brand perceived? Like, are people perceiving your brand as, positive, negative, like any kind of, associations, for example? And then importantly, how is your market share going against competition? So there's a range of information that we can provide. And a lot of the brands are therefore using us in order to understand how in the long run, over time, they are kind of increasing their level of influence, amongst the sort of social space, if that makes sense.
Makes a ton of sense. And I was actually particularly curious about the fact that you've been around for many years, but you only recently decided to go out and fundraise. Kind of what was behind that, and how can kind of this fundraising round has shaped your company to date?
That's a very good question. So I think when we first started, we wanted to make sure we really understand all the special things about the sector. So again, as I mentioned, when we started doing agency, different parts. We then, went through different iterations. Then we actually understood what was the set of features and data set that is robust for us to go out as a tech software as a service platform. So we launched that probably in 2019, the service offering. And then from there, we were able to, in a sort of bootstrappy manner, we had some really helpful angel support at that point in time with like early angels that support us through. So our goal was to achieve product market fit, achieve high retention, so see a few years, and just to make sure that we can land and expand kind of successfully and really, have happy customers. So once we proved that, we felt that we're ready to scale. And that's when we decided, okay, it's time to, make sure that we have really great backers and then we can really start scaling. So that's a sort of decision-making process, if you will. And I think what it sort of meant is that we have had to be very, very focused in prioritizing the features. We can't just say, let's build, I wake up one day and let's dream this, right? It's always like we are building this because our clients have asked us to do it 3 times, and and we definitely
Makes a ton of sense.
have to build it, and then there is a demand, and just making sure that we can,
Yeah.
we were not too resource rich, and that's basically what happened.
Yeah, the industry is so rapidly changing, right? Sort of inherently. You mentioned the trends. We kind of know them in advance, but then they're very ephemeral, right? So they're going to change. Barbie was huge, but it was last year. And then the second thing is that also the platforms themselves change, right? Sometimes their algorithms change. They're often behind black boxes. So I'm wondering, how inherent is the process of sort of testing different iterations to your services? How do you sort of keep them adaptive to respond to something that is shifting quite frequently?
Yeah, I think what I like to say is that our clients are the custodians of their brand. So they understand like what is relevant to their brand and what they would like their brand to be, and what their brands represent. So every brand, I think, has their core message and value and mission that they're protecting and making sure that it's true. I think what changes is all the opportunities out there in which you can be a part of, right? Like there was the Olympics. Do you want to sponsor the Olympics? Do you want to be part of that conversation? There is a Barbie movie that comes out. So I think that's why brands have to be very strategic in selecting which talent they should partner with, either one or many, or and for what objectives that they're trying to do through the partnership, and which moments that are relevant for their brands. And we see a lot of brands who are trying to change the way people perceive their brand, i.e., maybe they were very much of a heritage brand and maybe they need to appeal to Gen Z. And if that's the case, then you really need to think about, who the best group of people would be to do that, because that might be something that you as a brand can't do because everybody perceives you as a particular light, right? So those are the things to keep in mind. So what we do, I think, is allowing them to actually adapt to all the changes, and to have the information at hand so that their decision making is based on concrete data, and rather than just kind of like a whim, so to speak.
And I was actually curious because kind of you've been in this industry for a long time. I'm curious how brands were thinking, like the building of their brand 10 years ago compared to today. How has that evolved over time?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think it's certainly changed, and I think there are brands who are much more okay with it, and they're and like really embracing it, and there are brands who are like wanting to resist it more. So I think the part that are the same between now and 10 years ago was that, every brand who has a strong brand DNA, really spend a lot of time understanding, their brand, their value, and why they exist. Like, you really people, when I say any kind of classical brands, you think of Nike, you think of Disney, I don't know, you have, what your mission and what it is. And then, they then inject all that into their products and into their actions, right? Just to make sure that their product and their services and their actions are basically in line with what they believe in. But I think what is different is that you as a brand can tell everybody that you are, not just talking the talk, but walking the walk. Like, this is my mission. I'm doing it. Like, look, I'm delivering on my promise to, my customers. But it's not enough anymore. Like, compared to, 10 years ago, now you have to basically make sure that all the people on social media, which basically democratize, the space, is that if today a community of, whether it's influencers, whether it's others, if they're saying positive things about your brand, then that's what their followers is going to know about it, right? Like, their followers are not coming to, Nike or Disney's social media accounts directly. Like, everybody's kind of hearing it from someone else that is in their sphere of trust. And so I think that's the main difference. I have a quote actually, which I really like, which is from Jeff Bezos. And he basically says, your brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room. And I think that basically encapsulate the difference, I think, compared to say before.
I mean, you're absolutely right. I can see sort of the relevance of what you're saying in the news industry as well. Like, so much of the news is no longer necessarily coming directly from the outlets anymore, right? It's coming from some influences that propagate them and sort of influence their spheres of network. Um, I have to sort of shift gears a little bit. I have a question about AI, because I know that you say that you've incorporated AI and sort of some automation, both in identifying some good matches, using some predictive analytics to optimize these strategies. When did sort of AI come into the picture for you? And how do you see it sort of influencing the field in the next couple of years?
I think AI is now being used a lot for different reasons, and the reason why AI is so big now is because Gen AI has now kind of captured people's kind of imagination. But I think AI in general as a field is sort of broadly encapsulating everything from machine learning and various parts. And in a nutshell, what it is basically it can kind of examine you know a, a large set of data and then make sense of it. So I think in that sense, you're not going to, let's say you just had a fashion show, like, London Fashion Week was just over, and then you're trying to understand how everybody is, responding to your show, for example, as a brand. And you're not going to go and read every single post per se, but, leveraging AI, you can have a summary of what are the main topics, what are the main things that's been, relating to your brand. You get a sense of what is the sentiment related and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of things that are relevant to you that that you can do leveraging AI machine learning, and of course you can scale that to understanding of whether or not your brand is being posted in different places, maybe through looking at the imageries or various parts. So there's lots of things that can be done leveraging AI.
I wanted to shift gears a little bit. It's kind of related to what you were saying, Jenny. You work with companies of different sizes, with brands of different sizes, but you also work with brands across different countries. There's such a wealth of different sort of nuances in these markets, right? There's different trends, different cultures, different languages. And I'm assuming part of how you deal with this sort of diversity of the influencer market is by having a diverse team yourself. I know that WeArisma has members that speak over 16 languages. You're active in different regions. And this is something that interests us a lot at Europe Builds, because one of the most common problems for European entrepreneurs is how do you scale this up in a diverse market, right? So what was your way of working around all these nuances? Is team really important? And what are some sort of other tools to adapt what you do to the nuances around the globe?
I think having kind of come from a semi-international background myself, so I kind of, I've kind of was just spending time in Canada and in US and here. I think just naturally, I see a lot of, especially in London, there's just a very, very diverse set of talent. And I think what was really important to me, to the leadership team, is that for any role that we're filling, we really wanted to make sure that we have really great talent that really fit different parts of the role. So to give you an example, if we're looking to service clients in Asia, like we need people who have a good understanding intuitively of the different markets, for example, and actually have ability to read that. And same is with Europe, same with the US. And I think, it just turns out that once we kind of started to take that into consideration, it does seem like we have a very, very diverse team, which is fantastic, and I think that really help us, really understand the client's requirements as well. Because what's really great about influencer marketing is that, you can really work with a diverse set of talent, of content creators, and then they're always at the forefront of what is interesting and buzzing in different countries. So.
The reason why we started Europe Builds has a lot to do with the fact that we've been treating, or the world has been treating, Europe as very much an underdog. And recently, we've seen a lot kind of funding, like increasing massively with the European support, local support. But we feel like compared to the US, there is something that is fundamentally different, which is the importance of like entrepreneurship in the life of US people compared to Europe, which also comes with kind of how they storytell. And I was very curious about what have you seen as the role of storytelling when building a brand?
Yeah, I think the storytelling is everything because it's what you remember. I think I can sit here and give you, I don't know, a list of features, and you won't remember a single thing. But if I give you one story and I say, one of our clients spent a few hundred, tens of thousands dollars working with a celebrity, and she posted 2 posts about the campaign, generate 1.8 million engagement. Okay, cool. They're happy. But then using our system, they realize that, hey, there's an overlooked influencer who posted the exact same product and actually only has 10% following, but actually got the highest, got 2 million engagement about that same product, right? And they didn't even pick her as one of the campaigns. Like the person was just so overlooked. And, and then they were like, wow, this is amazing. You can really build communities, with anyone. Like social media basically democratized the whole thing. And so yeah, they started working with the influencers and able to, to really kind of, build a vibrant community there. So I think what's interesting is, once you kind of get these nuggets of stories, it's not only easier to communicate, but also people kind of remembers it much better. So yeah, storytelling, I think it's super important.
And have you noticed kind of any differences in the way a brand is actually doing the storytelling bit in Europe versus the US?
I think so. And I think it's just the cultural thing, right? You have the Nikes just do it. You have, the kind of, Apples think differently. Like, of course, there are just creative minds that really in Europe, you also have really brilliant kind of, you think about Cadbury with the gorilla commercial. Like there's creativity everywhere and there's storytelling everywhere. I think what is important is just the storytelling has to be culturally, relevant and sensitive, and I think that's it. And I personally, I don't think the European ecosystem is sort of not kind of as in building in Europe means that one way or the other, whether the companies are better or worse in storytelling. I think a lot of it has to do with the market sizes, how easy, how homogenous. I wouldn't say US is homogenous at all, but I'm just saying at least on a language basis, right? It is one huge market, and European is just much more individualized. So you just have to take that into consideration.
Another is part of how storytelling is important, I think, is it's very important for founders themselves and for entrepreneurship, right? And you made this interesting leap of jumping from the publishing and media industry into it. So surely you must have had an understanding of storytelling from that. So I'm wondering, what sort of insights do you apply from that to being a founder and entrepreneur? What are some of the things that you took with you in that sort of leap?
That it's important. I think there are different kinds of founders, and I think it's always important that in the kind of humdrum of building, because I think you like to be a founder because you like to build. It's always important to take a step back and have a think on what this kind of represent and how you can you can actually create a coherent narrative in which there's the origin story that people can remember, just because that's much easier, and attention is hard to so I think all the sort of learnings from the publishing is very relevant here.
And we just want to close today with asking a question that we ask every single one of our founders. And this is kind of what you consider the most important trait for a founder. And we've heard many different words before, like tenacity, you remember, Nico? What else? We had the stamina, laser focus. So what do you think is made you a great founder?
Do I have to pick one? Can I pick a combination, or that's not?
A lot of our speakers ask that follow-up.
I think that's a common trait among all of them. One is not enough. Okay, go for it.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of three. So think of like three circles. I think you need to have the vision for sure. You need to have the vision, but then you need to have the grit to execute, because having the vision is not enough. But then and then the last one is, I think you need to know how to find and motivate and build a great team. Like, it's just, you can't do it alone either. So if you have just grit, you don't have team. If you don't have vision, like, I think three needs to go together.
Awesome. Jenny Tsai, thank you so much for being with us today. Very interesting industry that you're in, where it used to be uncharted waters. And what still, I think many people think they try to understand by using their whim or sort of their instinct, and you offer something that's super data focused and super interesting. And I think it's great to see it sort of taking off in different parts of the world and different parts of Europe as well.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Your Builds, where we show that the European ecosystem is no longer an underdog story.
If you liked our episode and want to hear more, follow Europe Builds on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Born's YouTube channel.